Now we got to get into the first media block. This has miscellaneous in there. It is going to cover the new directive from the DoD that I just referred to, but it also has a tie into the government funding of trafficking human beings, which is becoming a consistent topic of news in a variety of layers, from politicians to, federal agencies to Hollywood and, celebrities and international type. There's a whole bunch of people being roped in there, right? Tony Hinchcliffe said, he's like, yeah, Kamala has been having these rallies, and he names, Eminem and Beyonce. He's like, or as it used to be called, the P. Diddy, freak off list. People who attended P. Diddy parties. That's why Hinchcliffe does, comedy. He can get it down. He can wordsmith it and make it. But I gave you the idea, and you can go watch him say it and make it funny. But in this situation, the human trafficking had a contract with it. The whistleblower from O'Keefe that's going to be at the end of this block, she seems very credible when I was listening to it, so it's worthy of consideration. $385 million contract for trafficking people into this country. We also have a clip later tonight where someone, the filmmaker, is going to ask Kamala where are the 300,000 children on behalf of the immigrant community. So there's a lot of that human trafficking stuff going around. And like I said, we also have the Abercrombie story coming up. But before we can get to all that, we have to cover last week, I was doing something around the house and I saw a headline. It was like last Timcast IRL closing down the show, whatever he said, right? And I thought, this is clickbait. Tim's not really going to end the show because that show's a gravy train. There's a lot of things you could do for money in the world. Sitting there at that desk is not one of the hard things in the world. So I didn't think he was going to give up the show. But then he went on for several hours, lambasting the people who made his show possible and illustrating and showcasing his poor management experience. He just hasn't had the time in his life to be exposed to managerial techniques and methods and other things that need to go on when you run a multi-million-dollar operation. And he hadn't outsourced to get a CEO or a chief operating officer or someone he could trust to make sure computers in the studios worked. The studios that they built were beyond his capacity to understand them, whereas when he used to build a studio, he could understand it. So he was just having growing pains. And fortunately for all of us, he aired those growing pains so that we could all learn from them. Because if Tim just went through that struggle, I'm not saying what he did was good. It wasn't. I'm not saying what he did was ill-timed, because now's a good time. Like, if you want to go to the next level, you have to get past this stuff in your growth of the company and not let it crash under its own incompetence or whatever. Right. So, in that, he just showed, I thought Tim had it all together. I thought he's making a lot of money and he had systematized, delegated, and had standard operating procedures. And that's how he can invite guests and fly them in and book hotels and all that other good stuff, right? Come to be aware that the most poignant thing that he said in there that's useful to the audience here is he said, if I have 10 people working for me and they're all working at 90%, right? They're doing almost all they have to do. And most people think 90% is pretty good, right? And it is. But there's a 10% gap there between what you're supposed to do and what's actually getting done. And Tim said, if I have to come through for all 10 people and add that extra 10%, it's an additional 100% to what I already have to give into the business, right? And that is a legit point, and it does make sense, and this is why people systematize and delegate. But you could also tell in that first conversation, he kept mentioning the word family. Family. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? So the next night, or the day after, when he got it together and had his moment of clarity, he announced that Timmy's getting married and they're starting a family, and all sorts of good things come from that, right? So that's wonderful news. I like to see freedom-minded people making more freedom-minded people out there, especially when they have the resources to keep them freedom-minded up until their adulthood. That's a good situation. And it wouldn't really be possible for Tim to keep doing what he's doing unless he finds some excellent talent of people who know how to do what he needs them to do. And he certainly has the money to pay them. If he has 50,000 people paying 10 grand or $10 a month, that's $500,000 a month just from his community, right? Those are his stated numbers. Those aren't, my assumptions. So if you got 500,000 coming in a month from the community, you can afford to pay a chief operating officer $300,000. And I guarantee you, if you get a qualified person and they're working for 300 grand, they're going to make sure you have an extra computer, an extra video card, whatever you need for the show to go on as scheduled without these snafus. So maybe like he spread himself too thin buying like Freedomistan or the coffee shop or any of those other projects because he kept kind of like branching out and trying to do these things, but they didn't fully come to fruition, which is another frustration he was airing, right? So part of it is I thought he would have friends and colleagues who were not letting him get into that situation like that, right? But apparently he was running a whole lot of stuff solo and maybe not taking the best advice or, saying no to good advice. I don't know. Um, Jeremy from the quartering is one of his friends that seems to have a really good business acumen. He swept in and picked up a whole bunch of people that Tim fired. So he hired Hannah Claire and Luke Radowski and like two or three other people because Jeremy, even though like we have to skip his coffee ads all the time because I'm not getting paid to advertise his coffee, but I like Jeremy and he has his money straight and he can hire people who like these are talented assets that just went on the marketplace and need income. And now he's able to scoop them up. So he's going to build his operation from Tim's folly or mistake. Uh, Tim's not going to be done by any circumstance because like he could still do his daily show even if he didn't do IRL. If he got cut off from YouTube ads, that'd be bad. So anyway, there was a big freak out this week. It's not that big a deal, but it was a good learning experience for entrepreneurs and freedom-minded people to understand just more money doesn't mean less problems unless you do the education and you do the delegation and the systematization and the optimization along the way, right? It's like a continual refinement process. And I really felt like, if people over at Tim's place were rocking some of those autonomy skills that I teach people for the past 5 years, none of that stuff would have happened because you'd have a culture of excellence, right? And since none of us are working for Tim, let's just take the opportunity for ourselves and just observe. This system that I've developed at Autonomy helps individuals like you overcome their fear and then learn high value skills, all within a culture of excellence. Those are all the things missing from the IRL milieu. You had a bunch of people over there that were taking money and not doing their whole job. They were coasting. And if there's not enough strict management, like, it turns into a charity. And Tim said he wasn't willing to run that. So that's why he was going to pull the plug. So I
Can I
don't
add
want
on
to
to
see.
that?
Yeah, please
Can
do.
I add on to
Because
that?
you're a
Because
businessman and entrepreneur, a
yeah,
mover and
businessman,
shaker.
entrepreneur, and former autonomy student and
Yeah.
autonomy graduate. And one thing that and I'm so glad you jumped in there because I was like going to jump in and kind of say, hey, sounds like they need autonomy. But not only that, but you do have Autonomy Unlimited as well, which is a marketing company that like offers like a lot of these services. Am I correct? Right? Like a lot
Well,
of these like
technically,
management.
we closed that last year.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, oh, my bad. I'm
We
out of the
handle
loop on that.
services in a different way now. But
Okay,
the
okay,
point
but
is,
you
yeah.
handle those
So,
services, and,
yeah.
and that's comprised of autonomy graduates, right? It's like these people who have talent. So it's like, okay, so now I'm like, how do we get a discovery call with Tim's team, and how do we get you guys? Because you're like the most competent people in the business. Like, how do we get you guys plugged in and help Tim run his
The
operation?
problem is,
And
I don't have time or inclination, and I'm
okay,
not interested in taking his money.
there you go.
Like, so, I mean, just like we talked about before the show, how you're going to start doing video production. And I
Yeah,
said I used to do that. And then I got to a point where I don't need that $5,000 or $10,000 a month because that's 5 or 10 grand that comes from doing stuff I don't want to do versus getting money from doing things I love to do. So I turned that switch off a long time ago of like needing to go to other places, do things I didn't want to do for
yeah,
cash because I have the skills that I teach in autonomy. That's why I have this freedom and mobility and lifestyle. And it doesn't have to be jets and, yachts and P. Diddy parties. It just has to do with being able to do well enough for your family that you're prepared for the unknowns and that you have a little extra to help your friends and family when they need and deserve some help. That's the type of freedom. You want to be a day early and a dollar long, not a day late and a dollar short.
yeah, absolutely. And I pay attention to that too, you guys. Like the fact that Rich is saying, like, I don't need that. Like that's not where I want to be. It's not the priority I have. It's like I've built something that's so awesome on its own that I'm not even interested in pursuing something like that. You know what I mean? Even if it's in my wheelhouse and I would excel at it. Like
I
that's
can make 20 grand a
awesome.
month putting ad reads into this show.
Yeah.
I have a colleague that makes $250,000 a month from doing ads. And it's not Tim Pool. It's flyover. Well, I don't know. I don't want to say the whole thing. Anyway, there are people who are very successful because they do advertising, and, their audience must appreciate that. Otherwise, the advertisers wouldn't be there. So they're advertising products that are worthwhile and have integrity to their audience. The audience appreciates it. That rolls over. I'm not trying to get revenue in the way of getting the news into this time capsule every week for the benefit of people now and into the future. But I do want it to be like self-perpetuating as far as the people who appreciate the detail and analysis that we purvey each week on a consistent basis. If they don't step up and support projects like this, then yeah, people go and do other things that they see more support for. That's how we as creators kind of like direct, like if I want to do a project and no one's interested, it's a big waste of my time when I could be doing things that serve value and utility to my community.
100%. And that's really what it is, man. As an autonomy graduate, I can say, that's really just a valuable service that, not only the skills you learn, but the community aspect of it. That's just such a huge piece of the puzzle. So yeah, just awesome, man. Love it.
All right. So if you got your bell rung with that, get autonomy.info. And we're in week 4, but we'll take enrollments for the season up until week 8. So you guys have a couple weeks if you want. And if you notice, I didn't we haven't been pushing enrollment because I figure you guys get it. I offer this. I do it twice a year. It's a unique opportunity to get experience. And I trust that if you don't want cringeworthy sales type stuff coming at you, that you have to know how to take your own steps. You see the opportunity. You could raise your value to the market in a permanent way. And if you don't get what that means, then that's not a good starting place for enrollment. Some people are comfort in their quiet desperation, and it's not my right to infringe on that, but it is my right to say, hey, if you're looking for something different, we do offer that over here. So without further ado, let's get to this media block. We're going to hear Jeremy from the Quartering cover the Timcast saga. I just wanted to give you the other side of it. Is it worked out. He's getting married. He's having a family. He's going to continue to build his empire, and it's just going to be probably more focused and productive in the right types of ways. So I have a couple of Tim's clips in here tonight. He does a bang up job of condensing some of the news stories that other places go all over the place with. And I do value his reporting. So let's go to this block. We'll get Timcast. We'll get some really great soul, and then we'll end up with O'Keefe.
The conversations I've had with family is like, I am under no illusions that I have the capability to make this company what it could be. And I hear all these things. No, Tim, you're wrong. You're wrong. Oh, come on. We've been trying to get a coffee shop open for 2 years. Yeah. Clearly, I cannot do it. My feelings are not hurt when I'm like, I can't do it. We've gotten to a point in the company where everyone's kind of just kicked their feet up and said, I'm doing what I need to be doing. Yeah. And then that just means I'm Sisyphus pushing the rock up. The problem is people are sitting on the rock.
He's losing his mind. And I'm reaping all the benefits.
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Quartering, and last night sent some shockwaves through the content commentator space. And actually, this week has been very tumultuous in the creator space. And I thought it would be a good, obviously, we're going to discuss Tim claiming he's going to quit doing his show, quit doing Timcast IRL, apparently. He said some rough things about his staff. He claimed they wanted to stab him in the back. They were caught stealing stuff, leaking information. And all of this, a 2-hour, rant and then quitting the show seems to have been sparked by a single graphics card failure. Now, of course, if he had Meta PC's promo code The Quartering, he probably wouldn't have had that issue, but that's neither here nor there. Obviously, there's more going on here than just the graphics card. And I do want to comment on kind of publicly dragging your employees in front of 70,000 people. If it really is that bad, then okay, then maybe you should be firing a bunch of people, and hopefully he's doing that. But I do have some critiques. I thought it was just clickbait to promote his members site, which it did seem to lean into, talking about people joining his members site. A lot of people very upset. The video has 5.2 thousand dislikes. Look, I want to point out, maybe you're looking for a new home. Maybe you're looking for a different type of community. We relaunched thequartering.com this morning. We've got some bugs we're squashing still, but obviously we're moving everything night, which received 5,200 downvotes, and many of the comments were expressing some level of frustration. I think I can have a unique take here. I like Tim. Tim is clearly burnt out. And that happens. I understand that. Tim talks about in his video that he has 30 employees and basically none of them can do their jobs, or they're only doing 90% of the effort, or they're just sitting around collecting cash. That's a wild thing to say in front of 70,000 people, but also that's a management issue. He also goes on to claim that there are no employees out there with entrepreneurial spirit, is essentially what he wants out of his employees. He makes a very valid point in this rant that anybody that can do like the online content stuff to the standard that he wants is already just going to do it themselves, and anyone left is suboptimal. And that to a degree is true. But, Tim, he's been managing a large group of people for a very long time, but I don't think he actually managed people in a corporate setting, something I have many years of experience doing, managing a very large team of very young, entrepreneurial-driven people. It is a falsehood to say that you cannot hire people with entrepreneurial spirit. You just have to incentivize them in other ways. For example, Maggie, I met her as a bartender. And we became friends many years ago, and I trained her over the years, and now she manages all my ad stuff. She manages all the shipping and receiving for the Trump stuff. She manages everything. I incentivize her with cash bonuses and time off, because those are what she values, and she's a great employee. I think it's baloney sausage that you can't hire people who are entrepreneurial. My video editors, Steven Voiceover and Al, they work like it's their own project. I pay them well. I offer them bonuses, times off. I'm flexible, and I think they're great. My graphic designer, Ben, he was working 2 different jobs just to get by before, and he has that entrepreneurial spirit, and he works hard like it's his own project. Why? Because of the job that he took for me, he no longer has to work at 2 different jobs, and he has a salary that he can count on. He has a boss that will give him time off if he needs it, and so much more. There are many people. I have a whole group of people working on my new website. Link, Derek, I don't want to say their last names, obviously, and Dougie. They're doing great work. And they're doing it because they're driven to make something great for all of you, because they're viewers of the channel or they're down for the cause, right? Every one of my employees has entrepreneurial spirit, and they always give 100%. The reason I think he's having this problem is he just doesn't have experience managing people, and that's okay. This can be fixed by hiring a COO, a chief operating officer, or something like that. Pay him $250,000 a year and have him run your 30 staff. He needs to trim the fat. He needs to stop hiring his friends. I don't hire friends other than Maggie, and she has worked out. Every other friend I've hired in my life has been a disaster. Obviously, the burnout is real. I'm feeling it. That's why I'm pushing the quartering.com/join so much. Actually, if you just go to the quartering.com, you can just click join the rebellion right here. And I'm burnt too. And how do you not get burnt? Well, you have this. You build a membership stuff so you don't have to worry about working 7 days a week. Well, Tim has, according to him, 50,000 paying members, meaning he has $500,000 a month coming in, minimum. I don't know why, I get it. But this was obviously not well received. Forget the last post, Special Timcast tonight, maybe the last one ever. Don't you dare. I don't understand. Something booked for later this month. Could have swore Laura mentioned that. I could be wrong. Decoy never got to go on. Got to see the chickens. Decoy joined as a member last night, by the way. People saying hire staff that are actually motivated to work and get stuff done for you on principle. People with Hill and the project management experience, not just people like you like. People who are aggressive and go-getters. Yeah, I mean, he needs to hire new people. You know, I don't know anybody who works for him, but I definitely don't think I would crash out on my employees for 2 hours in front of 70,000 people. Morale has to be at an absolute all-time low.
We had our like, I don't know, 12th studio failure this morning.
The new one.
Yeah, the new studio failed. And, my attitude with that is kind of just like, yeah, if we can't make cameras and a computer work, and despite all the previous failures we've had, there's not a single person here who can make sure that either the studio's operate.
But that's Tim's fault. That's Tim's fault. I don't have the size of operation that Tim has, but even I have backup PCs. I have a backup generator in my house. I have backup internet that I pay $500 a month for, so that if the internet goes down, I can still have my show. If my computer borks, I can still have my show. I have backup webcams, backup sound mixing board, backup microphones. All of this costs less than what Tim makes in a single night of his show. And it's still just me. Obviously, I don't have an IRL with all these employees, but it's not like I've got no employees. I've got almost 10 full-time employees. I don't have a problem keeping them motivated. It's about selecting the right people. I didn't just get lucky to get Steve and Al and Maggie and Ben and Derek. It's about recognizing the right kind of people that you need, and recognizing that if you don't have that eye, to hire someone that does. Liberal Hive Mind writes, why is Tim publicly airing dirty laundry and throwing a tantrum instead of just hiring qualified people? I think that one of the biggest problems is running this business in the middle of nowhere. He literally has to have that house because people need to relocate to whatever state he's in, West Virginia or DC or something like that. Because there's not a lot of people out in the sticks that know about internet culture. I have that same problem where I live. But do you know what I do? I train them. Maggie was a hair anesthetician or whatever they call it. She did hair. Then she did a bartending job. Now she completely understands internet marketing. She understands order fulfillment. She understands customer service. She helps out with Coffee Brand Coffee. She helps out with all my harebrained cookbook schemes. She helps out. She handles all the negotiations for sponsors. You have to train your people. If you don't live in New York or Austin or Florida or whatever, where all these people are, you have to be willing to train them. Tim needs to hire a COO, and he needs to put together a training program. I understand. See, Tim crashes out live on air and quits his own show while blaming his staff for his failures. I mean, the left is loving this, He's a controlling narcissist, drama queen. Well, you have to be controlling when you run this kind of stuff. He's right when he says he's got to have a hand in literally every cookie jar. I do. I talk to my graphic designer every day. I talk to my video editors every day. I talk to Maggie every day. I talk to Derek and the web team and Link every day. I talk to Wiener Schnitzel, my Discord admin, every day. And yeah, it's tiring, bro. It's tiring. But that's the cost of being the boss. The payoff is incredible. We're trading a little bit of short time. He talks about in this video, I don't get to see sunsets during the week. Bro, yes, you could. Life is about choices. He also said he skateboards every single day. So you make time for skateboarding, which is fine, but then don't complain that you don't have any free time because you clearly have free time to skateboard. He talks about, I don't buy Ferraris and this, that, and the other thing. Well, the guy lives in a $10 million mansion and has 20 cars. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that, viewers never want to hear about money. Here, I don't buy Ferraris or infinity pools. Has a Tesla Cybertruck, 2 motorcycles, multiple Teslas, 5th wheel mobile studio, truck for the 5th wheel, equipment for mobile studio, built a van he never used, 33 employees, 2-year coffee shop, never launched, blah, 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 fact-checking, skateboarding, crap galore. That's all okay, but just don't tell people you're poor. I think the best advice I could give Tim, and I have a feeling he might watch us, is what a lot of people say in his comments. Stop hiring friends. You have to stop hiring friends. You have to have an actual hiring process. I interviewed a lot of people, even when I was trying to find a fill-in thumbnail person. It's like, no, I need to talk to 10, 15 different people. I need to see an example of your work. This is stuff that, Tim's company just got so big, so fast, that this is just a growing pain. He just needs to bring in a COO, pay him $200,000-$300,000 a year, okay? Have him come in and fire the 6 or 7 people who are freeloaders that he claims. I'm sure many of them will quit after getting publicly destroyed last night. And get it together. We got 2 weeks till the election, bro. We need you. We need you, Tim. I plan on taking some time off after the election. I'm sure a lot of other people will, but it's about gritting and bearing it and getting through, because the world needs people like Tim. And he's got to just, figure out a lot better work-life balance. I get it. This is not a problem that he can fix overnight, but this is a problem that he can fix. Tim, you can fix this. Bring in an absolute killer who can hire and fire so you don't have to be involved in everything. There are thousands of people who are qualified for that job. You just have to look. I hope you were informed by this video. I hope you'll tune in to watch me live on Rumble and or Quartercast, and I hope that you'll take the plunge and join as a member. I'm having a real hard time getting people, so I'm continuing to add additional value. I'm working on an ammo discount, which hopefully I'll have today. Members only live streams. I can commit to once a month right now. So please go to thequartering.com/join, sign up, get in the Discord, enjoy the members content, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. Vehicles pitching downrange.
After engines. This is one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen in my entire life. Coming up on hot stage separation confirmed.
Booster coming in, see how fast this vehicle is moving on the left hand. Landing burn. 13 engines.
Our stuff up here.
Hey internet friends, what's going down in the next few weeks? And I don't mean just November 5th. For this video, I want us to step back and really take in the scenery and zoom out. What do the scriptwriters have planned for us? Well, they gave us a little clue, effective September 27, 2024, with Directive 5240.01, perhaps the most unsexy title ever known to man. I've lost some of you already with that one, but what if I told you the directive has granted the U.S. military the power to help with domestic law enforcement actions, including the use of deadly force against U.S. citizens in some situations just weeks before the 2024 election? What does it all mean? And most importantly, why now?
So I want to say this plain and simple. There is no place for political violence in America, period. None, ever.
Are you confident that there will be a peaceful transfer of power in January 2025?
If Trump wins, no, I'm not confident at all. I mean, if Trump loses, I'm not confident at all.
It's a fair election and that it will be peaceful.
Two separate questions. I'm confident it'll be free and fair. I don't know whether it'll be peaceful.
For a little context, on July 26, 1947, President Harry S. Truman signed the National Security Act, creating the Department of Defense along with a bunch of other alphabet agencies. This act merged the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, all into one. And with the oversight of all these military branches, the DoD issues these directives to standardize these operations. And you should know that these directives provide clear guidance on procedures, responsibilities, and strategies. And that these directives provide clarity on how the military coordinates with other agencies. Like I said before, if you're still with me, you're one of the few, because all of this sounds so boring, doesn't it? But it's anything but boring. It's very serious. So this directive was reissued right before the November election, which is no coincidence, and it's saying, quote, defense intelligence components may provide personnel to assist a federal department or agency, including a federal law enforcement agency, or a state or local law enforcement agency when lives are in danger, end quote. It goes on to say that the military can use lethal force under specific conditions, primarily when assisting law enforcement in scenarios deemed critical for national security or when lives are in danger. And it honestly makes me think of January 6th scenarios, as fake or manufactured as they might be. But let's zoom out here. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 is a law that prevents U.S. military from performing law enforcement activities within the United States, ensuring a separation between military and civilian governance. This act was put into place to prohibit federal troops from enforcing domestic policies and laws. But this new directive, this new order, seems to get around this problem of posse comitatus by focusing on assistance in urgent situations. Again, this directive was written by unelected randos, not legislation from selected/elected officials. They're not even pretending anymore, is what I'm saying. On paper, the military is trained for war and trained to kill the enemy, right? Just like how on paper, the police are trained to protect and serve the community. So would the military follow orders in this scenario? Would they fire upon their fellow citizens? You gotta acknowledge that a lot of good people were purged from the military during the COVID era for refusing to follow orders and inject themselves. I mean, I hope not. I don't have the answer. I wanna know what you think. But it seems like the next several years will be a masterclass on what it means to be an American patriot. Like, will patriotism become a liability at some point in the near future? It seems like the very essence of what America stands for is at a crossroads here. And it doesn't really even matter in a major way who becomes president, because we have millions of illegals flooding into the country. We have the dollar in free fall. We have hyperinflation, and we have forever wars. Partner that with nonstop psychological warfare on the population, especially children, a crumbling infrastructure, and weather warfare. We've got a situation on our hands. And I guess you could point out that the U.S. military has been used to kill civilians since its inception, a fact which I don't really like to bring up because it doesn't really stir feelings of red, white, and blue and, I don't know, apple pie and watching football on Sundays and being outgoing and friendly with strangers, and I'll stop there. Think U.S. Civil War, or even the Whiskey Rebellion, or the Kent State Massacre, or Waco, where the Army Delta Force killed women and children in the most horrible ways imaginable. So it's happened before.
U.S. military now is authorized to kill Americans on U.S. soil. That can't be possible. Yeah. This would open up the door for the careless use, and if more frequent and legal. It'll be legal now, so nobody will have to worry about that. Send in the troops. We need you to shoot a couple of these people. Yeah. They're opposing our policies. They're demonstrating against COVID rules. There's something they'll come up with. So I think it's very, very dangerous.
Responding with assets with potential for lethality, and I underline this, I highlighted it, or any situation where it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. I'm sorry to bog the discussion down with that, Dr. Ball, but I really wanted to hone in on this is their actual document. It's not just someone's analysis.
I've seen one FEMA agent since I've been here. He approached the front gate of our facility, and his request was, get this, cooperate with local government. Hey, you guys need to cooperate. We're like, what are you talking about? We have, like, look at all the law enforcement here. Look at all the firefighters here.
Yeah.
We've been reported to the authorities for domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
We're a bunch of special operation veterans. It doesn't get any more American than what we're doing. Yeah, we're here to help the people.
The reissuing of this directive alone is troubling, but back at the beginning of the year, a group of lawmakers from both sides of the aisle started pushing for a change to the Constitution. This change would allow members to be quickly replaced if there was a mass casualty event. Curiously, this was all proposed back in March, and there were a few articles about it then. But in the past month, as you can tell from the screenshot I'm about to put up on the screen, it's really been pushed out to the public by mainstream media. The Constitution actually mandates that the House vacancies be filled by special elections. After 9/11, Congress passed new rules stating that following a mass casualty event, special elections would need to be held within 49 days. But now what they want to do is for House members to give the governors a list of like 5 people as their possible replacement. They say this would allow for the continuity of government, and it would keep the political balance so one side doesn't have more representatives than the other, resulting from targeted attacks or I don't know, even disaster. And now representatives are saying that they absolutely need this amendment because of the uptick in political threats. Interesting timing, right? What do they have planned? That's all I've got for you today, internet friends. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and supporting my channel on Patreon. And thank you for buying my book, The Deep State Encyclopedia. Bye.
My line in the sand moment was when I found out that GSA had awarded a contract to a company to transport unaccompanied minors.
What was that like for you?
It was like someone kicked me in my gut. Once I found out about the contract, after that night, I got on my computer and I started doing a Google search.
Action obligation 40 million, total contract value 347 million. That's over $250 million. That's a lot of money to transport unaccompanied children. I mean, this is a big money business.
And that's why we're sitting here today, because as I shared before, what you know, you cannot unknow.
The crisis of conscience would only grow and reach inside the holy grail of the unaccompanied child transportation business. There's the white buses right there. That's the FedEx transportation hub for the unaccompanied minor children. They stop the transportation of children, they stop the money.
My name is Clarissa Rippey.
And where do you work?
I work for General Services Administration, aka GSA.
And for those who are not familiar with what GSA is or what it does, can you talk a little about that?
GSA, it basically manages all the services for the federal government. Then you have the transportation side of GSA that manages like travel, transportation, and logistics, that's the area that I'm working in right now.
And what sort of thing do you do in that department?
I'm what's called an 1102. I'm a contract specialist, and my responsibility is to work with contractors that provide products and services to the federal government. And I work on a team of contracting officers, and we award those contracts.
NGO stands for non-governmental organization. But in addressing political and social issues, they receive money from the government. These groups get large amounts of money. The more immigrants they represent, the more money they receive.
Follow it?
Well, the film Line in the Sand, we saw so many of these companies. People were amazed and shocked to see just how many busing companies and making so much money off of the crisis. Were you aware of some of those names of those companies in the film? Or?
Not originally. Then I came over to TTL and became aware that that GSA had awarded a contract for the transportation services.
What was your line in the sand moment here in this situation?
My line in the sand moment was when I found out that GSA had awarded a contract to a company to transport unaccompanied minors.
So you found this out, and then you had this line in the sand moment. What was that like for you?
It was like someone kicked me in my gut, because I had just gotten a promotion accepted the position for that particular division, and I was not aware at all that the agency that I worked for was party to transporting unaccompanied minors. Once I found out about the contract that night, I got on my computer and I started doing a Google search, and I did keyword searches. I did transport unaccompanied minors. I put in transport of immigrant children, and all of these websites popped up, and it led back to some of these NGOs and these companies, like Acuity, which was the original awardee of the contract, and then MVM protested that award, and the contract wound up back with MVM.
Within the last 9 months, MVM has received over $129 million from the Department of Homeland Security, $719 million from DHS overall.
But as I continued to read the documents that I found online, I found that these are the illegal immigrants, the minors who are coming over without their parents, without anyone that they knew, being shipped at every hour of the day, especially like late at night when we're all asleep in our beds and our children are safe at home. These children were being shipped all over the place.
Shipped over, and that must have made you feel guilty.
Yeah.
For having this promotion. Mm-hmm. And that was your line in the sand moment. And we also have some documents here that we've been provided by you. Just tell me what this one here indicates.
This is a GSA contract that was awarded to MVM.
And so it says here in this document that action obligation $40 million, base and all option, total contract value $347 million. That's over $250 million. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money to transport unaccompanied children. I mean, this is a big money business. It just seems like lost in all of this is any semblance of right and wrong. It's just a lot of people who watched Line in the Sand. The takeaway is it's all about money, and there's no regard for children or human beings.
Evidently, it's been very effective.
Very effective.
They have noted that they wanted the contractor to transport 1,000 children within a 24-hour period of notification. 1,000 children.
Why do they want that?
Exactly. That was my question. Why 1,000 every time within a 24-hour period?
Sounds like a quota or something to justify the contracts. It's almost like they treat these children like widgets or products. Like a
commodity.
Exactly, like potato chips on the back of a transport vehicle. You don't see, I don't see a lot of federal employees sitting down to speak about this. What led you to be here?
Now that I'm privy to this information, I can't forget about it. I can't just say, I'm just going to wipe my brain clean. It never happened.
But most people do.
Yes.
So why is that?
And I'm guilty of that too. You hear someone will share information with you, and you just like, no, I just want my quiet life. I don't want to be involved. I just don't want all the drama. Right. I just want to live my peaceful life and just go
through the comforts of life.
Yeah, the comforts of life.
Eric Cochran, my former whistleblower friend, he said people just want to go through the comforts of life. And,
right.
And a lot of people are going to wonder, are you afraid of? First of all, you're doing nothing wrong. You're just speaking the truth. Nothing that you've said here is improper in any way or illegal in any way. If anything, you're just being honest about the way it is. But you know how these people can be and how these government agencies can be. Are you concerned about retaliation?
No. And I'll tell you why. Lord, what they are doing is your mission. This is what you have placed us here for, this very moment. This is what the Lord has placed in my heart to do. And people can try and do whatever they want to do to me, but they're not fighting me. They're fighting God. This is about the children.
We got an unaccompanied minor right here, guys. This is heartbreaking right here. ¿Vienes sola, verdad?
If
ahí viene tu mami, tu papá?
Over 250,000 American-born children were missing. It would be spoken about in every Starbucks, coffee shop, in every restaurant, everywhere you walk, someone would be talking about, did you hear about 380 plus thousand children missing in the United States right now? People would be talking about, but because these are children from other countries, no names, no faces attached to them. People go to sleep, they lay their heads down every night, and they wake up oblivious to the fact that some mother, some father, some grandparent is missing their baby.
I don't think people know about it.
Right.
When you were at the premiere in Newport Beach of the film Line in the Sand, tell me about that experience for you. I have some breaking news for you here this evening. Working for GSA, she became aware of contracts for the transportation of unaccompanied children. I recognize this is very emotional. Come on up.
It was like a second kick in the gut, but it had faces this time. It wasn't a contract, words on a sheet of paper. It was actual faces.
¿Viniste sola? ¿Cuántos años tienes? 10. 10 años. ¿De dónde vienes?
De Honduras.
¿De Honduras? ¿Cuánto tiempo llevas viajando, mi reina?
All that said, you know the saying that you don't know what you don't know, right? Well, see, now you do know, and you cannot unknow what you know now.
Yeah!
I know you're just trying to do your job. That's tough.
Yeah, it's not easy. So.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a little 3-year-old girl walk up to you.
3-year-old girls?
It's not easy.
Last week I had a 3-year-old come up, and all he had was a paper sewed into his shirt. Address and phone number were wrong. As a parent, I don't like seeing that. It makes me get closer to my kids.
My buddy said there was an unaccompanied child that you guys just picked up?
Yeah, we got a few, like 3 that we had earlier.
Traffic?
Yeah, they're gone already.
Traffic.
The last thing I want to say is there's another saying. It takes a village to raise a child. No, not true. It takes a village to protect a child. We have to protect our children. And the only reason why I'm here is because that's my duty now. I cannot unknow what I know now.
You're a hero.
If you support Border Patrol agents like Zach, please support us at Citizen Journalism Foundation. We provide funding to help these brave whistleblowers and legal defense funds. Here is the information for Citizen Journalism Foundation, and stay tuned for the movie Line in the Sand, premiering October 10th on the Tucker Carlson Network.
That video was brought to you unintentionally by Project Veritas because they fired James O'Keefe and set him free. And now he does really, really great work. We have 2 more videos in the next block that are follow-ups to that story. But first, let's see what we learned. We learned about posse comitatus and that Alex Jones was right again because he made a whole Police State 1, 2, and 3 series showing federal troops training against American citizens, and they would have the citizens like, please don't hurt us, please don't hurt us. And they would go in and bag and tag and gag them. And that's history. I don't know if you could find those on YouTube. Are those allowed on YouTube? Police State 1, 2, and 3. There's a series out there. I bet it's on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, every place where freedom is allowed to sprout its wings. But I bet those videos aren't allowed on YouTube for some reason. Might have to check on that. Police State. It seemed so far off at the time. It's like, this guy's wacky. This isn't, but he was showing you actual military drills that people got like candid camera footage of and were concerned with, because that isn't even supposed to be something you simulate in an exercise as the military back then. But now they're just going to make it, for whatever reason, they're going to empower Trump to be a fascist dictator with this new Directive 520, whatever the thing was, right? And they gave it that number name, so it's hard for us to talk about and pass around. So maybe I should get more familiar with its name and look more into it as we get into the show here. But what did you think for that first block, Scott?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. Well, not good stuff, but like, okay, for example, the posse comitatus thing. Like, one of the main points that that really stood out to me was like, the whole COVID mandated vaccine program in the military really purged a lot of people who were stubborn and very, were exercising their own will. And so if you get rid of those people, then you're left with all the people that just kind of go along with the plan, all the people that are just willing to follow orders, even at against their own self-interest. And so it seems like, now we have a situation where that seems to be who is comprised in the military, which is, I mean, we've been saying this forever, if there ever were to be a situation where they were then turned against the American population, you'd have people who, and I've seen clips too. I've seen like TikTok videos of like, there was like some female who was in military outfits. Who knows if she's actually in the military or not, but she was saying like, you better follow our orders or we will open fire on you and all this stuff, like talking to the American people, and so you probably you're left with the woke, indoctrinated order followers and perfect recipe for disaster.
It's like a recipe for Boston Massacre Part 2.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's really interesting too, because like they talk about the period after the election to the inauguration date, or January 6th again this year. It's ironically on January 6th again. It's like they couldn't just do like the 7th or the 5th. They had to do January 6th again. Like, come on now. And I remember Alex Jones in 2020. He was calling that period the 79 days of hell. Like they even made a website, 79daysofhell.com, and it's like he's been talking about it too. It's like that period is where, regardless of the outcome of the election, it's going to be very incendiary. And, they're setting up the chessboard for some very interesting outcomes for sure.
Like if you look at the chessboard and you see this DOD directive after they've already had a directive where they can legally propagandize Americans, right? That was the soft one, whatever the Smith
Modernization Act. Yep.
Yeah. Where they could lie to us, but now they could use military force against us. And at the same time, you got the election, and at the same time, they're liquidating InfoWars. So I don't know what kind of like red flags you would need to see as like warning, danger, Will Robinson type of situation, but it's not being done by Trump. That's what I can tell you. He's not the one doing these things. So there's bigger fish to fry out there than red team, blue team.
Yeah, that's exactly. Exactly. And, they've been at InfoWars, particularly like Owen Schroyer, and, they've done a lot of coverage on the border there where, they've like actually caught like Alex and Drew Hernandez were at the border, and they were like, there was this random lady in a mask was putting kids in a car, like coming out of, and he's like, they confronted her. They're like, who are you? Where are you going with these kids? She was just like trying to shuffle off as quickly as she can. It was like very suspicious stuff. And they've done a lot of reporting on the border there too. I've seen they brought other correspondents on who've done a lot of work, like trying to follow up and kind of see, where these children end up, and then like doing like almost like well visits to make sure they're still, and then it's like they're gone, disappeared. No one has any record of them. No one knows where they went. And I was just looking online here, and it's really interesting. I'm like, there has to be, because I've heard, some other, like I think it was Vance was talking about this particular issue of the 300,000 missing kids, and so of course I wanted to see what the fact checkers have to say. And I look at this, Associated Press, they're running cover. They're like, it says, blah, blah, blah. They kind of just break it down from their point of view. And it says, quote, this is not a missing kids problem, but it's a missing paperwork problem. And so they're blaming it on the bureaucracy and the fact that there hasn't been an effective way to track these kids. And that's why they're missing. It's not the fact that
what else you don't keep paperwork for? Illicit transactions.
Yeah.
Where is the paperwork? Why isn't it filed? It seems a little suspicious. I don't know if Bram Stoker had a reference for the people who run cover for Renfield, but I use Renfield as a euphemism for people who run cover for vampires. And that lady who's picking up, who's got the mask and she's taking the kids and she runs away from accountability for her actions. Those are Renfields, and there's a lot of them out there. There are people who they'll say yes for money. See, they don't know how to make their offer to the market, and they're desperate, so they compromise their integrity. That's a big problem in the market, and the school system produces that problem on purpose because it's useful to Dracula to have lots of Renfields out there. So I'm leaving that there because that's foreshadowing of the next two stories that come up. We have Kamala, where are the children? That's a Forbes clip, not a conspiracy theory clip. And then we have Law and Crime Network to give you the untoward details of the former Abercrombie and Fitch 85-year-old dude or whatever. He's a real creeper, and he had a lot of Renfields around too. So let's just keep that idea as a theme, because there might be more of that coming up in a podcast. Let's go to this block from Forbes and Law and Crime Network.
That Latinos want open borders. We want a secure border like all Americans. And we know what it leads to. Eduardo, who is the producer of Sound of Freedom, he has so much firsthand experience. So Eduardo, why don't you tell us about the movie and what we're facing with the immigration that the president's talking about?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, President, for your time. My name is Eduardo Verástegui, and I am very grateful to this nation for opening the door to my dreams. This nation has been such an amazing blessing in my life. God bless America. God bless Mexico, and God bless Hispanic America. And let's make America and Mexico and Hispanic America great again. Together, pro-life again, healthy again, and free again. I met these heroes 10 years ago in Los Angeles, California. Ex-Navy SEALs, ex-CIA agents, and they travel around the world undercover rescuing children. And when they told me in details what they do, in how they rescue these children, my eyes were open. And I said, I'm a filmmaker, I wanna make a movie about this, because the first step to eradicate child trafficking is to raise awareness. Because if you don't know that this problem exists, how you can fix it? So I made a promise to God that I will dedicate my entire life to end child trafficking. Yeah. To end child trafficking. Because God's children are not for sale. Children are sacred. And I am very grateful with you, Mr. President, dear amigo, dear hermano, because of you hosting a private screening in your house, because of you endorsing Sound of Freedom. After that, Sound of Freedom became the #1 independent film in box office ever in history, produced by a Mexican producer. Thank you for that. Thank you for the incredible hard work you're doing. Thank you for putting the children first. And that's why it's so important, is for all the media, for all Mexican Americans, Hispanic Americans, to vote for President Trump. And I know we will win for the third time. For the third time. Yes. Yes. We will win for the third time. And that's a fact. It's not an opinion. It's a fact. Because it's true. Because it's true. Look what is happening right now. Look what is happening right now with these evil people. Obama, Hillary, Kamala, Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, all this team. There's more than 300,000 children, over 300,000 children that they came through the border, they released them, and we don't know where they are. Kamala, where are the children? Kamala, where are the children? You know, these people, Kamala and Biden, they're the biggest human traffickers in the history. And everyone knows that. And that's why I'm here to give my 100% to support my dear friend, President Donald Trump. And again, we will win for the third time. God bless you. God bless you, Mr. President.
Really nice. Thank you.
We need to put you in the White House back again. In the beautiful White House. You're going to be in the beautiful White House again.
You bring up something that people don't talk about, the press doesn't talk about. I think if it were on the other side, it would be one of the great scandals in history. It's actually 325,000 children are missing, sex slaves, or dead.
Yes.
One of those four things: slaves, sex slaves, missing or dead. And think of what 325,000, you know, we say it's a number, blah, blah, blah. I was talking to a reporter before. I said, 325,000. Oh, what else is new? He's going like, let's go to the next question. I'm saying to myself, can you believe it?
Wow.
A bad sort of a reporter. I told him he is. But think of it almost like let's get on with the interview. Think of what 325,000, we have religious leaders up here. Think of what 325,000. How many times can you fill a nice big stadium like a Yankee Stadium with that 325,000? They're missing. I think many of them are dead. Most of them possibly are dead. It's so sad. Our country is so sad. And then you wake up to the news that we've given the entire Israeli game plan to the enemy. Who could imagine this? Who could imagine this? I would say Israel's not too happy about that, right? But with all of this together, add it up, and I'm just so glad I bring it up, and it doesn't register. Maybe it registered better the way you said it, because, you're such passion the way you said that. We are missing, during their regime, this stupid person that was the border czar. She was made the border czar. Now she said she wasn't. She was the border czar for 3.5 years, and now she said now, whether she is or not, she was in charge of the border. That's loud and clear. She never once called the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol, by the way, 5 days ago endorsed me, which is something they're not even really supposed to do. And in endorsing me, they gave it a full-throated endorsement, but in endorsing me, they said how horrible she is. And it's not easy for them to say that. This is the vice president of the country. They work for the country. They said the worst that they've ever seen. And they're great people. They're people that want to do their job. It's easier not to do the job, probably. Just let the people walk right into our country. They want to do the job. They love the country. They're incredible people. I've gotten to know them very well. And they said not one time, the question was asked by the fake news, how many times did she call? Not one call was ever made to any of them by either Biden or Kamala. Not one call about the border. And I actually think it's the biggest thing. We talk about the economy and we talk about inflation. Let's put them together. But there's something about that border that's just really, really evil. The drugs, the human trafficking, it's not just people pouring through. It's the human trafficking, and they traffic in women mostly. It's mostly women, believe it or not, as much as we talk about the 325,000, but women still have the big edge. They traffic in women and children, and they do it at levels that, by the way, 4 years ago, it's always bad. If you do one person, it's bad. But this is 15 or 16 times the number. Nobody checks. Nobody does anything. You know how you check? You go and open the trunk of a car. That's how they put them mostly in trunks of cars. How would you like to be a woman, a little girl, a little boy, in the trunk of a car? That's how they find them. A lot of times they're dead because of the heat. They drive through. By the time they get to the destination, they open the trunk and they're dead. And this horrible, incompetent person has allowed this to happen, and never one time called anybody from the Border Patrol. They work for her, and they work for him, and then they complain about a bill. It's a phony deal. It's a scam. There's no bill. I never had a bill. All you have to do as president, wake him up and say, Joe, we need you to say close the border. That's what I did.
That's right.
I just said we're closing the border. He keeps talking about, they keep bringing up a phony bill. The bill was horrible. 2 million people are allowed in. It was a horrible bill, stupid bill, but has nothing to do. As president, you have tremendous, it's called extreme power. You have extreme power. You can, just by the fact you say, close the border, and the border's closed. That's it. Very, very simple. You don't need all of this nonsense that they talk about. But the truth is, for some reason, and I can't figure it out, for some reason they want open borders. Nobody's been able to tell me why. I don't think they can tell you why. They just want open borders. So we have to win the election. I'm so glad you brought up, you said 300, but the number's actually 325. I'll give you a number that's really bad, too. So the Border Patrol, because they've had it, they've never done this before, they released a list of criminals in our country. And they really are tremendously good if you let them do the job like I let them do the job. We have 13,099, exactly, 13,000 during their term. They tried to say, oh, this is over 40 years. No, this is during their 3.5 year that they've been there. 13,099 murderers. These are murderers. These are people that were in prison and they're murderers. Some are up for the death penalty, but some killed far more than one person. 13,099, it's the exact number. Every one of them has been released into the United States of America. Then you have the drug lords and the drug dealers. There are thousands of them. Then you have the traffickers, the human traffickers. These are people that largely were in jail, caught. Then you have the gang members. These are people that weren't in jail, but they ruled the cities. They ruled the cities, the gangs, they ruled them. You don't have them, Christian Durrell, for the most part. If you did, you'd do something about it very quickly. We're lucky. But these are gang members that are so violent. And you see it's happening in Aurora, in Colorado, where you have a governor who's a radical left governor who's petrified of the whole situation. And they have military-style weapons. They have weapons that are of military quality. Somebody said it might be a step up. It's called a Supreme, a military Supreme. They have weapons and they're taking over apartment complexes and everything. These gangs come from Venezuela largely. What's happening to our country it's so crazy. Nobody would think it. I mean, you sit here and you're just amazed. As you speak, you get angrier and angrier because it's so simple and it's so obvious, and everyone knows it's true, and nobody does anything about it. All they think about is transgender operations. All they think about is we want men to play in women's sports. You know, I've never met a person, because I'm a sports guy, I've never met a person that came up to me and they say, we want men to play in women's sports. Somehow they're pushing it. Has anyone here ever met? I've been doing this a long time, and I've been talking about this for a while, because I'm ending it on day one. I'm ending it on day one. And we, despite a whole web of things, we wouldn't accept it.
To anyone who thinks they can exploit and coerce others by using the so-called casting couch system, this case should serve as a warning. Prepare to trade that couch for a bed in federal prison.
Huge news to report about the former CEO of what was once a powerhouse clothing brand. Mike Jeffries, the ex-head of Abercrombie & Fitch, is now accused and charged with sex trafficking. This alongside his British partner and a middleman who apparently sports a snakeskin patch on his nose. I know, it's a lot, but we're going to dive in and we're going to bring you everything we know so far in this brand new criminal case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. A deviant and a predator. That's what alleged victims call Mike Jeffries. This is the man who was once at the top of the fashion industry when he was heading up Abercrombie & Fitch. Well, now Jeffries, his romantic partner Matt Smith, and a third man, Jim Jacobson, they have all reportedly been arrested as part of an FBI probe into alleged sex trafficking. As if we didn't talk enough about sex trafficking when it came to Sean Combs. But now we have another high-profile person caught up in similar allegations. So this comes as a grand jury for the Eastern District of New York indicted the men on charges of sex trafficking and interstate prostitution, specifically citing 15 John Does who say that they were victimized as part of this. I want to bring in former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani to talk more about this. Nima, so good to have you. Thanks for jumping on. What is your reaction to this? I mean, this is as I said, we weren't talking enough about Sean Combs. Now we have another major player in a different industry who's been charged with this.
Jesse, I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not. These allegations have been circulating for quite some time. There's been a civil lawsuit that's filed. Now, I didn't expect the feds to come in and make these types of arrests. Oftentimes, they do not get involved when there's a civil lawsuit, but clearly there's enough smoke here and enough evidence for them to come in. And the Eastern District of New York, they don't mess around. It's like the Southern District. Obviously, they handled the R. Kelly case. They've handled the NXIVM case, that sex trafficking case, I believe, also came out of the Eastern District. So they're pretty well versed in handling these types of claims. And what's really interesting to me is, obviously, we're talking about a lot of victims, but really the dates of the offenses. Some of these allegations are older, going back to 2008, as recent as 2015. So I'm thinking maybe the feds were up against the clock a little bit when it comes to the statute of limitations for some of these allegations. That's why they acted when they did.
Interesting. And we'll talk a little bit more about what might have motivated this, but to bring everybody up to speed, this investigation into these three men, it centers around whether they exploited and abused young men at parties that were hosted all around the world and across the United States. Mike Jeffries, who's now 80 years old, he lives in West Palm Beach, Florida. His partner, 60-year-old Matthew Smith, originally from the UK, lives there too. And James Jacobson, sometimes referred to as Jim, apparently lives in Wisconsin. They're expected to make their initial appearances in their respective states. Then they're going to be arraigned in New York federal court at a later date. By the way, I should give everybody a disclaimer. When you see these photos of Jacobson that were featured in a BBC documentary about Abercrombie and Fitch and its alleged cover-up of impropriety, and we'll talk about that, these photos have gone viral. And you'll see that Jacobson wears what appears to be a nose patch. It's a piece of what we believe to be snake skin over his nose. This is apparently to hide the result of a plastic surgery mishap. Just another interesting detail in all this. By the way, we're going to keep an eye out on this story as it develops. We always want to do that with our big stories. We want to keep providing you updates as these things move on through the legal process. And one of the reasons that we can continue to do that for you, one of the reasons we're able to put on these sidebars, is because we get amazing support from our partners. And I really just want to call out one in particular right now, our sponsor, Upside. Now, Upside is just awesome. This is but what happened is it launched an image of young sex appeal with what was really nearly naked male models featured heavily in its advertising, sometimes on huge billboards all around the world. The Eastern District of New York alleges that behind the scenes, though, Jeffries and his co-defendants used lies and the promise of ad campaigns and career opportunities to force male models to have sex with them. Prosecutors, they gave a news conference about the investigation on Tuesday, providing very disturbing details. So we're going to play you a portion of that announcement right now.
So here's what's alleged in the indictment. Jeffries and Smith employed James Jacobson to act as a recruiter to find men. Jacobson engaged in, quote, tryouts with men across the world where he would typically pay them to engage in sex acts with him. Following the tryouts with Jacobson, Smith would often then personally approve whether the men who were selected would meet Jeffries and Smith. The defendants would fly the selected men to Jeffries and Smith's homes in the Hamptons in New York City or to hotels around the world in such places as England, France, Italy, Morocco, and St. Bart's, for the purpose of attending events to engage in commercial sex. But beyond simply hiring men for sex, Jeffries, Smith, and Jacobson used force, fraud, and coercion to traffic those men for their own sexual gratification. For example, as alleged, the defendants employed a referral system and an interview process that did not inform the men of the details of the sex events before they attended, including the full extent and nature of the sexual activity that would be required of the men at these events. They caused the men to believe that attending these sex events could yield modeling opportunities with Abercrombie or otherwise benefit their careers. Smith and Jeffries employed a secret staff to operate these sex events. The staff ensured that the men signed non-disclosure agreements and handed over their personal items, such as their phones, before the start of the events to maintain the secrecy of these events. The defendants caused the men to believe that not complying with requests for certain acts, sex acts, during the events could harm their careers. The defendants pressured the men to consume alcohol, Viagra, and muscle relaxants known as poppers during the sex events. And they required the presence of staff during the sexual activity and ensured that the men did not leave the sex events until Jeffries and Smith decided that the sessions were over. Also, as alleged, on more than one occasion, Jeffries and Smith either directed others to inject or personally injected men with an erection-inducing substance for the purpose of causing the men to engage in sex acts the men were incapable of engaging in or unwilling to engage in. Additionally, the indictment alleges on more than one occasion when men did not or could not consent, Jeffries and Smith violated the bodily integrity of these men by subjecting them or continuing to subject them to invasive sexual and violent contact by body parts and other objects. As alleged in the indictment, Jeffries, Smith, and Jacobson didn't just carry this activity on for a couple of occasions. Their sex trafficking and prostitution enterprise lasted at least from the end of 2008 until early 2015. During that period, the defendants hired dozens of men and transported them to New York and around the globe. They spent millions of dollars on a massive infrastructure to support this operation and maintain its secrecy. This included hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash for commercial sex, prolific amounts of money for staff to run the sex events, money for domestic travel, international travel, hotel rooms, services from a security company, and Jacobson's salary, among other things. Now, this investigation remains ongoing. Although there are 15 John Does identified as victims in this indictment, this interstate prostitution venture encompassed dozens and dozens of men. And I encourage anyone with information about this case, including anyone who was a victim of the defendant's alleged crimes, to contact the FBI.
My gosh, Nima, those are incredibly disturbing allegations. And for me, what stands out is this level of organization of this. If you take these allegations as true, this was a systematic, well-organized scheme to do this. But what stands out to you as you heard, again, kind of unthinkable allegations from the prosecutor?
I agree with you, Jesse, and that's why I started talking about the dates, because it seems like the type of case that would normally be charged as a RICO, either substantive or RICO conspiracy charge. Obviously, that can bring in a lot of individuals. It can bring in a lot of crimes. They didn't charge that in this case, but clearly you have a criminal enterprise here, and obviously that there are many individuals whose purpose was to recruit, groom these men, and engaged in prostitution. And I think one of the big takeaways is what the U.S. attorney said, and that's that forced fraud.
A lot of Renfields out there, It all kind of ties back to the Epstein, Leslie Wexner network, but Law and Crime's not going to be able to educate you on that. But if you check a couple years ago, before it became independent, Abercrombie & Fitch was owned by the Limited Incorporated, which was a Leslie Wexner joint. He owned also Victoria's Secret and some other stuff back in the day. So if those timelines overlap, that's quite a coterie that's going on out there. So it's not just Diddy, and it's not just Homeland Security and DHS and who was the other group that was working with the migrant kids. And by the way, Scott, you had read the AP's apology, but my wife showed me this. Michael Cloud, who's a congressman, demands answers from ICE over nearly 300,000 missing migrant children. So the AP is like, oh, well, maybe they couldn't make it to their court date, or maybe we didn't have their address, or just because we don't have their paperwork doesn't mean they're missing. However, this Republican congressman from Texas seems to disagree with those sentiments and has formulated this fine letter to kind of substantiate there is a problem here. It's not that you just don't know where the receipts are for those kids and you don't know where they are right now. It's that you seem to bend over backwards to assure us that they're okay, and there's nothing to see there. Nothing to see there. So we could go into great detail just into that story, but I wanted to show you there's more than one side of the claims out there, and you need to be able to adjudicate between the two sides being claimed to find some semblance of the truth and understanding in a non-contradictory way. So, Scott, do you have comments on those clips? I'm sure you're not a shopper of Abercrombie and Fitch.
No, certainly not. And just I mean, that was just the obvious thing. Like I was also looking up some articles here while I was listening, and it's like the obvious connection would like the big story, like if you were a journalist and you wanted to break the big story, would be making that connection between, what this Jeffries guy was doing under his tenure as the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch and the Les Wexner connection, which leads you to the whole Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And that would be the story. Or if you wanted to, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, like in a discovery type scenario within this trial, if that ever comes out too. If those connections are made, or if perhaps this is Wexner running cover. Maybe he sees something on the horizon. Maybe there's talk of this Epstein list being released and just more information coming out about that. And so to cover his bases, he's just burning one of his Renfields, and putting them on the spotlight to divert any possible attention away from him. And yeah, that is one creepy looking dude too. Like, what in the hell, dude? Like,
And in my scenario, Jeffrey Epstein was a Renfield as well, because the only reason that Leslie Wexner gives him all that money and like the brownstone or whatever is because Wexner wants things to go on there that he could participate in, but he's not responsible for, which is why they would externalize it and get themselves a front man who can be the Renfield and fill the place up with cameras and do all the other good stuff for their network. And that's an international crime network that is, pretty substantial out there, but not talked about because it doesn't take over housing complexes and apartment buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we'll see how much Trump leans into this, whether he's just doing it for political advantage during the election, because, it's an easy thing to call the Biden and Harris administration out on, is just their complete dereliction of any sort of semblance of law and order through the border, which has led to just this unbelievable crisis that's occurred, not even to mention these missing children. And I mean, there's enough evidence to suggest that there's just such an unimaginable amount of just like catastrophe happening when it comes to the children involved in this. When they incentivize people crossing the border with children, to get some sort of temporary citizenship or whatever, they prioritize those cases. So it's like, they're incentivized, and, you hear a story where like they smuggle a kid over and then they just send the kid back, and they use that as like the vessel for getting these people across the border in some sort of legitimate, semi-legitimate way. It's just such an unbelievable humanitarian crisis at the very least, if not just the most horrific crime that's ever been perpetrated.
Not only that, but think of it like this. Do you think the immigrant children that are being smuggled and trafficked in are being housed by conservative Republican families?
No.
Okay. So therefore, they must be getting housed with Democrat, progressive, liberal families, right? Okay. Yeah. Let's say you are the head of household for a Democratic, liberal household, family type situation, and you want to save a refugee and offer them the American dream. So you bring them over, make sure they're healthy, fed, clothed, getting schooled, all that good stuff, because you're a good Democrat. Wouldn't you be proud to show up at that court date when the federal government sends you, hey, you got to bring the parcel that we dropped off at your place, you got to bring it for check-in? Wouldn't you be proud to show up and say, look at the job I'm doing? 300,000 is not a small, trivial amount. You tell me 10,000 we don't have their address for. Okay, that's a thing. We should work on that. 300,000 seems to be like a system, because my question would be, how many migrant children have been brought in that we do keep track of at this point? If 300,000 is the number we can't come up with the receipts for, these human parcels that are shipped around with like labels pinned to them, if we can't find that many, maybe we should get someone new handling the logistics of such things. And then we have to question, what is the nature of the logistics and what purpose does it serve? Maybe it doesn't need to be going on with our taxpayer dollars. In fact, let's get down to like Trump saying he wants to get rid of income tax and stuff like that because he could use tariffs. And tariffs are libertarian. They're in this book right here. I had this out earlier with the Autonomy students for the Q&A. But this is a big red book called Sic Iter ad Astra, This Way to the Stars, by Princeton professor Andrew Galambos. It's the V50, the Volitional 50 lectures. His lectures were on methodology of non-aggression merged with libertarian ideas of economics. And in there, tariffs play a major role, not taxes, because as we know, taxation is theft, especially if you don't have representation regarding where those taxes are being used or spent, which none of us clearly have representation at this point. But maybe in the future things change. I'm not sure. Before we move on, Scott, any other observations before we make the pivot into light speed with the nature of the clips we have to cover tonight are quite comical. So there'll be a lot of levity as we go along past this human trafficking point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's such a huge issue. And it's like, along my truther journey, I spent a lot of time in this rabbit hole to the point where I had to take a step back. I
Sure,
found
it's
myself in
heavy.
a pretty dark
Yeah.
place. And, and once I like reconciled a lot of this information and, I've mentioned that show Imperium, that movie Imperium on the show before. It's like, it shows different cases throughout the world in which, it highlights situations where the government actually steps in and gets involved to cover up different child trafficking cases, just from like, a singular issue all the way up to, large networks of trafficking. One of them was like in Belgium. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but it's such a crazy situation. And there's one from Lithuania, the UK. It goes into a lot of the instances in the UK, which I'm sure you could speak on, you know what I mean? And it's like, it shows you in a way that it almost seems like these governments almost exist for the sole purpose of covering up these child trafficking rings. That leads you to believe that the extent to which the influence and it's like it's almost that is the currency by which these international governments operate on is
That's an interesting
the
observation
trafficking
you
of
just
children.
came up with. All right, so let me draw a picture for you because when you said that, I thought of a book. The book is called The Hiram Key is what it's called, by Robert Lomas, maybe. So you can look that up. The Hiram Key. It's about the origins of Freemasonry. And when I read that book, I don't know that it was the author's perspective, but this is what I drew from it. It seems like if one were a criminal and one were to try to protect that criminal network, you would want a system of safe houses and passwords and international access and these sort of things, right? And then you overlay what Lomas is saying were the original practices of Freemasonry. I'm like, oh, this is a safe house system for people who otherwise would be put in the ground, probably, if it were not for their ability to move around, be anonymous, and stay safe and welcomed into various places, right? Church might have also had something like that going on. I think the Catholic Church in California has had to pay out like close to $1 billion for their abuses. So like there literally is a price on how much does it cost to abuse children in this country. And it's been adjudicated many times. The Boy Scouts, which came from the Cecil Rhodes, Lovat Scouts in Rhodesia, right? There's a lot of buggery in those equations of history. And we, the people not doing that, should learn how to insulate ourselves from such trends that seem to be empowering to all the wrong people. But that guy from Abercrombie, he seems to be one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And just to get that on the
record, a lot of plastic surgery. He looked like that leopard lady.
Yeah.
Remember that leopard lady?
Yep. Oh yeah, dude, it's so crazy. And I just wanted to let the audience know if they want to look more into what I was talking about. I just looked it up. So the Belgium case, there was a guy named, it's the Marc Dutroux case, where like the government stepped in to cover up this massive child trafficking ring, and then the citizens protested when the story came out, and there was this thing called the White March, where everybody had like they were wearing white and had like white flowers and white balloons, and they came out protesting the government for their handling of the case. And well, that's the way they characterize it here, the handling of that case, and demanding
You
more
couldn't do it
effective
here
justice.
Media would say it was racist. It was
Yeah,
like white power or
exactly,
something.
exactly. And so they're, it's like they're characterizing it here as like, more effective justice. But really what the people were waking up to is the fact that their government was covering up a giant child trafficking ring that started off with like a small investigation that led to a larger and larger and larger scale till they realized this was like a big network. So it's a crazy, crazy story. And it just lends credibility to the fact that like governments exist for the sole purpose of like covering up child trafficking. And we know all the way to the top. I mean, there's the cases of the, call boys getting smuggled into the White House, like, the Washington Times.
True
like,
story.
This is, and the Franklin cover up. Look at that. These are
The Finders case.
The Finders case. Yes. It's like, it's irrefutable that this goes on. to the extent to which, but it's just like, so it's a dark thing. And so, that's what I'm saying. Like, hey, if Trump were to come in and actually try to make efforts to resolve this or weed it out, I think that would be the reason why they're so threatened by him. Like, that would be the reason. Like, this is the reason. This is the big one right here. If
and if one of those gangs that supports those types of trafficking operations should be threatened by Trump, or one of the drug lords, like, he just made some new policy statements, like he's kind of said them and people didn't really hear them. But when you hear some of those, and if you're, if he's like, if you've killed a cop or if you kill an American citizen, it's a death penalty, all those sort of things, it would be easy for those groups to like. So I'm saying it's not just like Iran that Trump has to worry about trying to kill him, and that Trende or Uragra, whatever group, I'm sure they're more formidable than Thomas Crooks, right? So that is also like, and so instead of preparing for any of that type of stuff, I don't think that's going on. They're like, we got to make sure we have this plan to do these things on January 6th so Trump can't take office if he wins. Like, that's our whole game plan. It's like, that's not going to help America whatsoever. Like, that's not a plan to resolve the job situation or the inflation situation or the border security situation or any of that type of stuff. So anyway, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come